Drunken behaviour, rudeness and aggression, pretty much a nightly occurrence for most bouncers, as we see at 11:05. First, we join James Mates for the ITV News.
A diplomatic standoff. The Russians say they will take action against Britain, but won't say what. There will be an adequate response, says the Deputy Foreign Minister, but London must wait to find out. Tonight, Brown and Putin still appear to be two leaders on a collision course. The Kremlin said that if it were to act as Britain had, it would expel 80 diplomats from Moscow. Britain insists no retaliation is justified. Also on the programme, he's out of the House, but this time it's the House of Commons. Galloway suspended but still fighting.
They should be striking a medal for me, for my work on Iraq, not suspending me.
Explosions on the Napoli, charges are detonated in an attempt to break the stricken ship apart. And a privacy row, how internet spies are snooping on the Facebook generation.
Everything you put online is in the public domain. Essentially, you shouldn't put anything online you wouldn't be happy showing your mum.
Good evening. Yesterday, Britain expelled 4 Russian diplomats. Today, London was braced for retaliation. In the event, President Putin chose not to hit Britain with tit-for-tat expulsions, at least not yet, but to go instead for something more like a game of cat and mouse. All we were told by Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister was that there would be what he called an adequate response. He didn't say when. The only clue was that it would not involve damaging the economic links between the two countries. So, talk of a return to the Cold War between Britain and Russia may have been premature, but tonight a resolution to the standoff seems as remote as ever. Julian Mannion is in Moscow for us tonight. Julian.
It's another twist in this already twisted affair. Yesterday, the Russians warned that Britain's decision to expel 4 Russian diplomats would have the most serious consequences. Today, they said their response would be adequate and appropriate. And so far, in public at least, they've done nothing. President Putin is a man who prides himself on his toughness and determination. He is said to have been deeply angered by accusations from some in Britain linking him personally to the Litvinenko murder. But today his government chose to play its cards carefully. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister tried to portray Britain's action in expelling 4 Russian diplomats as rash and a threat to cooperation in the war against terror.
This is a clear path to confrontation. Our reaction will be adequate and appropriate. It is clear that London's policy will close doors for cooperation between law enforcement bodies on issues directly connected to the security of millions of Russians and Britons.
The Russians are keen to remind Britain of their numerous failed attempts to extradite from London people they regard as wanted criminals and even terrorists. There has been a string of requests for Boris Berezovsky, the tycoon accused by Russia of money laundering and planning a coup against the Putin government. Russia says that if it had expelled British diplomats every time an extradition request failed, the British embassy would now be short of 80 staff. But today, Boris Berezovsky insisted that the real scandal is Russia's failure to send Andrei Lugovoy for trial in Britain.
My point is Putin himself and his regime, criminal regime which he created. And it's the reason why I accept any proposal to go to the third country.
In Moscow, the British ambassador, Anthony Brenton, told Russian media that the Litvinenko killing was a serious crime and that British measures were mild and well thought out. Leading British businessmen attended a specially called meeting at the embassy. They are hoping that the profitable business links between the two countries will not be damaged.
There's a lot of business between the two countries that is built up over a long period of time, and I don't think anybody would want to see that seriously damaged.
Are you worried?
Not today.
Russia appears to be hoping to defuse the tensions while still flatly refusing to send Andrei Lugovoy to Britain. The man himself continues to insist that he should stay in Russia. Tonight, this crisis is delicately poised, but there is still no solution in sight.
So, Julian, what are we to make of the way that Russia's responding to this?
Well, we're waiting to see above all what this adequate and appropriate response might be. I think the style in which they're playing it is a very careful and tactical style. Instead of, as the British did, putting their heaviest political guns up, as they did in London yesterday, the Russians put up today the relatively obscure figure of their deputy foreign minister. And in terms of what Britain and the world wanted to hear, he didn't really say anything. What it seemed to be was a sort of attempt, strangely enough, to try to claim the moral high ground, to suggest that Russia was really behaving with restraint in all this. But whatever the Russian tactical approach, there really are a couple of irreducible facts in all this. Above all, the fact that the Russians, as they have stated once again clearly today, are not going to hand over Andrei Lugovoy. And that is a challenge which the British government is going to find very difficult to ignore. And therefore, however tactical and however long this game turns out to be, the actual end result is still not clear, still in doubt.
Julian, thank you. The controversial MP George Galloway tonight faces suspension from the House of Commons for damaging Parliament's reputation over his links to an Iraqi children's charity. The allegations against him included concealing funding from Saddam Hussein's former regime. The Respect MP is unrepentant, as our chief political correspondent Daisy McAndrew reports. He says he deserves a medal, not a punishment.
This former boxer's never gone down without a fight, is well used to being evicted and likes getting the last word. And today was no different. As colleagues demanded his suspension from the Commons, he hit back, calling them a kangaroo court of Sir Buftons and Sir Tuftons, and still saying he's done nothing wrong.
I'm proud of everything I did in the run-up to the war with Iraq. And if I'd been listened to, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in now.
But it's not that they've been criticising you for. They're saying the way you acted, the way you spoke to them, the way you behaved during the inquiry was wrong, and that's why they're suspending you.
Well, if people put utterly false allegations to you, which they turn out to accept that they were utterly false, you're bound to respond fiercely. And I'm a fierce person.
And he does defend himself fiercely, but not all the accusations against him have been utterly baseless. The Mariam Foundation, set up in '98 to give Iraqis medical aid, was named after a little girl George Galloway brought here for leukemia treatment. Saddam was then overthrown in 2003, and soon the UN began looking into the foundation as part of an investigation into the oil for food programme, believing it had been abused by Saddam. 2 years later, a Senate committee and the UN claimed money from the programme ended up in the Mariam Foundation. And despite Galloway's denials, the Charity Commission launched its own investigation. Now, that inquiry ended last month, finding the appeal had received at least £230,000 improperly. Galloway says he neither asked nor knew where the money came from, but was still criticised for failing to find out. He's rejected the allegations as palpably false. Today's report is a result of an on-off 4-year investigation by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards.
If these people behind me had listened to me, hundreds of thousands of people now dead would still be alive, and Britain would not be in peril here at home and around the world. They should be striking a medal for me for my work on Iraq, not suspending me.
Fighting talk from the cigar-chomping MP, who says he won't miss his colleagues during his suspension, and it's hard to imagine them missing him. Daisy McAndrew, ITV News, Westminster.
Still to come tonight. Caught on camera the moment a suicide bomber attacks a rally in Pakistan. And the Potter price war, the battle to cash in on Harry's multi-million-pound finale. But first, 6 months after she was grounded off the Devon coast, the last rites are being given tonight to the stricken container ship, the Napoli. A series of controlled explosions have almost cut the vessel in two, which should enable tugs to pull her apart and off the rocks. There are warnings tonight that when she splits, residual oil could spill into the sea. Andrew Stricken reports.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. 40 kilos of explosives to be exact, but even that wasn't enough to break this stubborn mule's back. Ironically, it was the cracking of the Napoli's hull following a storm off Cornwall in January which led to her crew abandoning ship. Since then, the Napoli has been nothing but trouble. After being deliberately beached, 50 containers floated ashore, which led to hundreds of people scavenging Branscombe Beach, taking everything from disposable nappies to motorbikes. 6 months and £50 million later, attempts to refloat her and even pull her apart have failed. And it seems today's explosion has not been entirely successful, only separating the deck plates. To make matters worse, 5 to 10 tonnes of oil is now contaminating the beach.
I suppose it could have been an awful lot worse. They did manage to pump 3,500 tonnes of fuel oil off that ship. So I can only say yes, they did a great job for that. Inevitably, it hasn't gone according to plan. We're just going to have to grin our teeth and bear it.
At high tide tonight, attempts will be made to pull the Napoli apart so she can be towed safely. And if that doesn't work, then there'll be more of this tomorrow for the ship that refuses to break up. Isla Traquair, ITV News.
England's top doctor put forward a controversial proposal today to solve the transplant crisis. Sir Liam Donaldson wants everyone to be registered as an organ donor unless they specifically choose to opt out. The idea received widespread backing from other doctors and medical groups, but opponents say the state has no right to take organs from people after death without their prior consent. Phil Ray-Smith reports.
Every day, someone dies while waiting for an organ transplant, and many more people are buried with organs that could have helped them.
I'm proposing that we move to an opt-out system, as exists in other countries like Spain or Austria, where everybody's name is put on the organ donation register, and then they have the right to remove it. That way, we'll get much higher levels of donation, and we'll be able to save a lot of people's lives.
At Europe's largest renal unit in West London, Hilary Rose has 4.5 hours of dialysis 3 times a week as she waits for a suitable kidney.
How difficult is it for you to find a new kidney?
Well, because of my ethnic background, it's very difficult to get a kidney because we don't actually have enough donors.
There are currently more than 7,000 patients on the waiting list for transplants on the NHS. Kidneys are needed most. The average patient will wait 2 years for a transplant, and every year around 400 people die while waiting for suitable organs.
What's being suggested is a so-called soft opt-out scheme whereby patients register their objection to donating their organs. If no such objection exists, then their family are consulted to see if there's any strong opposition.
I think it's a step too far, and Parliament thought so 3 years ago, and they were right then. This is something that patients should make a decision about for themselves. It is their bodies that count. They should make the final decisions about what happens to them.
Scotland's chief medical officer has rejected a similar plan, and even doctors who rely on organ donors to perform vital transplants admit assumed consent isn't a perfect system.
Well, the problems that can occur with presumed consent revolve around the difficulties that you do not precisely know the wishes of the potential organ donor.
In fact, transplant professionals insist nothing beats making your views about organ donation clear well before your death. Phil Ray-Smith, ITV News.
13 people have been killed in a suicide bombing at a rally in Pakistan. It happened near a court in the capital, Islamabad, where a leading opposition figure was due to speak. Violence has been growing in Pakistan throughout this year.
The cameras were rolling at what had been a peaceful rally. The moment Pakistan took another step down the road to lawlessness. A suicide bomber on a motorcycle blew himself up just moments before one of the country's most controversial political figures was about to arrive and address a crowd opposed to Pakistan's military dictatorship. And this not in a frontier province beset by Islamic militancy, but in the heart of the country's capital, Islamabad. By the time the emergency services had cleared the area, 13 lay dead. This is the man who may have been the target, Iftikhar Chaudhry, until recently Pakistan's Chief Justice. When President Musharraf sacked him earlier this year, he sparked a wave of anti-government protest. They are protests that have allowed Islamic extremists to step up their campaign against the military regime. Perhaps more important than the death toll here today is the growing fear that Pakistan may, slowly, be heading the way of Afghanistan, or worse, even the way of Iraq. Some other stories in the news today, and Gordon Brown tonight triggered more speculation about a possible early general election by summoning cabinet ministers to a summit at Chequers next week. They're likely to discuss how the party will maintain its opinion poll lead during the rest of the summer months. Unemployed Pierre Williams has tonight been charged with the triple murder of a mother and her 2 children. The beaten bodies of Stars in Your Eyes contestant Keisha Wizard, her brother Fred and mother Beverly Samuels were found last Thursday at their home in Manchester. And pagans are invoking magic rain to wash away a famous cartoon character that's been painted next to one of Britain's most distinctive landmarks, the water paint version of Homer SImpson, next to the ancient fertility symbol known as Cerne Abbas Giant in Dorset, will vanish when it rains. The book might be all about magic, but today the final episode of the Harry Potter saga was about who can grab the biggest slice of the profits. They are predicting record sales for the 7th and last Harry Potter novel when it comes out at a minute past midnight on Saturday morning. But as Tim Rogers reports, independent booksellers fear they're about to be crushed by the supermarkets in a Potter price war.
In Bookland, the magic is real, and the midnight launch of the final Potter is expected to break all records, so it's not surprising the stores are lining up to fight for business. In Horsforth, outside Leeds, Alice Schooler is planning a launch party at the bewitching hour as well.
I now have my full pre-order amount of 176 sold.
176?
176. All gone. And I can't get any more.
But Alice is an independent retailer, and that means that pound for pound, she just can't compete with the big multiples.
Why should I buy a book from your shop? It's charming, it's lovely, but why should I buy a book from here and not nip down the Asda and buy it from
Because if you don't, then there's not going to be shops like this around.
Supermarket Asda have been slugging it out with publishers Bloomsbury over the retail price. That argument has now been settled, but the fact is that some big shops will be selling the new book for less than it cost them to buy. It may be a children's book, but the publishers are recommending it be sold at $17.99. Independent stores are offering a modest discount, retailing the book at $15.99. The wholesale price is just under £10. And popular bookstores like WH Smith's and Waterstones will be selling at around this price. But supermarket giants Asda and Tesco say they'll be offering an even bigger discount, reportedly selling at around £8.87. They have been and continue to be a phenomenon, and the release of a new Harry Potter novel should be good news for booksellers everywhere. But the fact is that margins are so tight that many independent shops across the country simply can't afford to stock them. So fierce is the competition that the big multiples and supermarkets win every time, and the independents are being forced out of business. The Potter effect just seems to get bigger and bigger. The final book will probably top them all, but the little people probably won't be the ones benefiting in the end. Tim Rogers, ITV News, Horsforth.
A look at the markets now, and the FTSE 100 share index closed at 6,659, down 38 on the day. The Dow Jones ended the day at 13,971, up 20 points. And tonight the pound is up again. It's trading at $2.04, up almost a cent, and that's its highest against the dollar for 26 years. Sport now, and it's still not certain whether David Beckham will make his debut for the LA Galaxy against Chelsea this weekend. The England star could play only a limited part in training because of an ankle injury picked up on international duty. But the Galaxy say they're hopeful he will be fit to face the Blues in a friendly on Saturday night. And there was another injury in the Tour de France, but luckily it was only the bike which got hurt in this bizarre collision. German rider Markus Burkhardt crashed after hitting a dog during the 9th stage. Thankfully, both man and Labrador escaped unharmed. On those huge social networks like Facebook that have colonized the internet, you may think you are only among friends, but beware, in fact, they are increasingly being patrolled by snoopers who who could deny you a job or a qualification if they don't like what they see. One group of Oxford students has already found that out after pictures of their antics were used against them. Tim Ewart reports on a new threat to the Facebook generation.
They're supposed to be fun. Websites that allow you to talk about yourself and swap pictures, music and chat with your friends. But increasingly, they're attracting unwelcome visitors. These are Oxford University students behaving badly. They've just finished their final exams and they're celebrating. Someone's put the video on the Facebook online network. No harm in that, you might think. Wrong. This is Alex Hill's Facebook site. When she finished her Oxford finals, she posted some silly photographs of her celebrations. Now she faces disciplinary proceedings for disorderly conduct after the university authorities took a look.
Well, I specifically thought that they couldn't because there's privacy settings on the website which mean that only friends that you've selected and students within your network should be able to view your profile and photos. It specifically did not have check the boxes for staff, for faculty and for alumni of the university.
Pictures like this may not just get you into trouble and embarrass you now. What goes on a website could very well come back to haunt you, and it could affect your employment prospects. A recent survey of hundreds of employers found a quarter had rejected job applicants based on information about them found online, including sites like MySpace and Facebook.
Everything you put online is in the public domain. Essentially, you shouldn't put anything online you wouldn't be happy showing your mum.
It was a moment of glory for 22-year-old Amy Palumbo.
This is Amy Palumbo, Miss New Jersey. She says someone tried to blackmail her after taking embarrassing photos from her Facebook site and adding offensive captions. It started a new debate about online security in the United States.
Once you post your image online, you can't take it back. Anyone can see it.
And this video has been posted on YouTube specifically to warn young people just how easily pictures that they put online can appear over and over again. Tim Ewart, ITV News.
A reminder of our top story tonight, and Gordon Brown is still waiting to learn what President Putin's response will be over Britain's expulsion of 4 Russian diplomats. Mr. Putin left it to his deputy foreign minister to say an adequate response would be given. Now for a look at tomorrow's front pages, and the Telegraph leads with George Galloway claiming it can reveal that Scotland Yard is to take the first steps towards a possible criminal investigation against the controversial MP. He denies any allegations of wrongdoing. The Guardian claims that the government plans to reduce red tape in education and hospitals by scrapping all but 30 top-down targets used to vet performance. The Independent questions the government's green policies, reporting that while the cost of train and bus travel have increased by over 50% in the last 3 decades, the cost of car travel is down 10%. And The Sun says that Harry Potter fans are happy after the supermarket chain Asda got the green light to sell half-price copies of the latest book. And that is it for tonight. A reminder that you can get the main ITV news stories delivered direct to your mobile with Newsfix, our subscription-only service. Send the word FIX to 8833 for the cost of a text. We'll send you details of how to subscribe. Coming up next on ITV1 after the national weather, the news where you are. But for now, from me and all of us here, good night.
The ITV National Weather is sponsored by E.ON, the energy behind power gen.
Hello, good evening. That's how tomorrow is shaping up. Sunny spells and heavy showers makes it the same as today for most of us, but you'll do a little better in the southwest. The showers soon dying down, a pleasant afternoon and evening there. Overnight tonight, well, there's still some sharp showers around. They become lighter and more scattered during the night. Some mist and fog patches forming too, as temperatures get down to around 10 or 12. And then tomorrow, it's a scattering of heavy showers, perhaps not quite as many as today, but still some sharp downpours around. And then things quieten down in the southwest. I think southwest Wales and the West Country could have a very pleasant afternoon.